voice to the conversation in the comments section.
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Metropolitan Police are currently not investigating that event, having reviewed evidence from the Sue Gray inquiry. Now, the Prime Minister says he expects to end all the last domestic coronavirus restrictions, including the legal duty for cases to self-isolate, a month early in England. During Prime Minister's questions, Boris Johnson told MPs he'll present the government's Living with COVID plan after the half-term recess on February the 21st.
Provided the current encouraging trends in the data continue, it is my expectation to end the last domestic restrictions, including the legal requirement to self-isolate if you test positive, a full month early.
To energy companies and then force families to pay it off in instalments for years to come.
And in the last hour, the UK national terrorism threat level has been reduced from severe to substantial. Home Secretary Priti Patel says that means an attack is likely rather than highly likely.
His plan is to hand billions of pounds of taxpayers' cash to energy companies and then force families to pay it off in instalments for years to come. If it sounds like he's forcing people to take out a loan, and it looks like he's forcing people to take out a loan, Isn't it just forcing people to take out a loan?
We're having a few technical issues, but in the last hour, if you didn't hear me before, the UK national terrorism threat level has been reduced from severe to substantial. The Home Secretary Priti Patel says that means an attack is likely rather than highly likely. We'll be keeping you up to date across the day here on GB News. For now, let's go to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
Yeah, very good afternoon. Welcome to the programme on this Wednesday. Well, today at PMQs, the Prime Minister was somewhat on the front foot, defending the government's record on tackling COVID scammers and its approach to the cost of living crisis. This all coming, of course, as that new image was published by the Daily Mirror newspaper during PMQs, which appeared to show the Prime Minister at a Christmas quiz with a bottle of Prosecco close by. We'll be looking at that story in detail with some top two MPs from Labour and the Conservatives in just a couple of minutes. Also a reminder, though, of course, the Prime Minister announced that COVID restrictions are due to come to an end. Those domestic restrictions, probably a month earlier than expected, at the end of this month in a significant move. But let's have a look back at some of the best moments from today's PMQs.
Welcome to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Was the Business Secretary right to say that fraud is not something that people experience in their day-to-day lives?
Of course, this government and this country despises those who defraud people, and that's why we crack down on fraudsters, Mr. Speaker, and we've strengthened our anti-fraud task force. We're bringing forward an economic crime bill, Mr. Speaker, but we also attach huge importance to tackling neighbourhood crime and crimes of violence, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased that those crimes are down 17%, Mr. Speaker.
We've had lockdowns for the last 2 years. Two crimes that people could commit were online fraud and throwing parties. And so far as I can see, the numbers for both of those have gone through the roof. But I was asking the Prime Minister about the 14,000 cases of fraud a day. Many older people duped out of hard-earned savings. And the Business Secretary casually suggests on TV, don't worry, it's not real crime. There's a crime gang in Manchester, Mr. Speaker, nicking cars and shipping them around the world, all financed by COVID loans from the taxpayer. And what's the Chancellor's response? Write off £4 billion in losses and block an investigation by the National Crime Agency. His cabinet turning a blind eye to scammers. Is it any wonder that his anti-fraud minister realised no one in government seemed to care and threw in the towel?
Prime Minister. No, Mr. Speaker, because what we're doing is tackling crime across the board, and that's why we're investing more in tackling fraud, Mr. Speaker, but we're also tackling the neighbourhood crime that is of such massive psychological damage to people in this country, tackling knife crime, tackling burglary, tackling crimes of violence in the street, Mr. Speaker, with tougher sentences, which they voted against, by the way, Mr. Speaker, and putting more police out on the street, Mr. Speaker. And the reason we're able to afford it, Mr. Speaker, is because we have a strong economy and we're coming back strongly from COVID, and that is thanks to the big calls that this government got right.
Mr. Speaker, his anti-fraud minister quit, saying the failure of government to tackle fraud was so egregious that he had to, and this is his words, smash some crockery to get people to take notice. Well, it seems that the Prime Minister hasn't noticed the broken plates and the shattered glass all around him. It's almost as if he's been completely distracted for weeks. Talking of scams, households are going to have to fork out an extra £19 billion on their energy bills. The government is insulting people's intelligence by pretending it's giving them a discount. But it's not. It's a con. A buy now, pay later scheme, a dodgy loan, not a proper plan.
Mr. Speaker, our plan to tackle the cost of living is faster, more efficient and more generous than anything that they have set up, Mr. Speaker. We've lifted the living wage by record amounts. We've cut the effective tax for people on universal credit, Mr. Speaker, and we're now setting out a fantastic plan to help people with the cost of energy, Mr. Speaker. And it is more generous and more effective than anything Labour have set out. And the only reason we can do it's £9.1 billion, Mr. Speaker. It's huge sums that we're using to help people across the country. And the only reason we can afford it, Mr. Speaker, is because we have a strong economy, the fastest growing in the G7, as I think I may have pointed out to the right honourable gentleman last week, and not just last year, but this year as well.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister clearly hasn't got the first clue what the Chancellor signed him up to. So let me help him out. His plan is to hand billions of pounds of taxpayers' cash to energy companies and then force families to pay it off in instalments for years to come. If it sounds like he's forcing people to take out a loan, and it looks like he's forcing people to take out a loan, isn't it just forcing people to take out a loan?
In Band D council tax, A to D council tax valuations across the country, that is 27 million homes. We're giving them the equivalent of a £150 rebate off their council. Their offer is for £89, Mr. Speaker. Ours is faster, more generous and more effective.
There you go. That was PMQs for you this afternoon. Well, let's get the thoughts and views of two top MPs. We're joined by the Labour MP for Blakely and Broughton, Graham Stringer, and the Conservative MP for Penrith and the Border, Neil Hudson. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's start off, first of all, Neil, with this announcement by the Prime Minister at the very start that we're likely now to see domestic restrictions when it comes to coronavirus end this month rather than next. Quite a significant move, it must be said. A welcome move on your part?
I think we have to be cautious moving forward. I've always said through this that you need to look at the best scientific evidence and the data. So I would say as we move forward over the next few weeks, let's have a look at the data and see what the data tell us. And then if the virus circulation in the population is getting to a level that is suitable for restrictions to be eased, then we can move forward. I mean, there's no doubt that at some stage in the foreseeable future, we have to learn to live with the virus as an endemic situation rather than a pandemic situation. But I'm cautious. Let's follow the data and see.
But isn't it, sorry, just to pick up on that, but that doesn't seem to be where the Prime Minister's at, because the Prime Minister's already essentially announced that, well, this is going to happen.
Well, I think what he said in the chamber today is after the recess, they will bring forward the latest announcements as to where they look, and it looks like he is anticipating that potentially the restrictions could be lifted a month early. I'm a veterinary surgeon by background, and I've always said through this, we need to look at the epidemiology, we need to look at the scientific data, and if it is safe to do so, then we can progress on that level.
Graham?
Can't disagree with the analysis that you look at the evidence that we've got and you take decisions based on that. But throughout this epidemic, the Prime Minister has taken decisions based on what the politics of the situation are or were. So in December, we weren't going to move into Plan B. Owen Paterson got into trouble. The Prime Minister got into trouble. So we went straight into Plan B, 36 hours after the Prime Minister said we wouldn't, not based on the data, but based on the political situation.
That wasn't true in July, though.
It's been true throughout it. The evidence has been...
They made a decision in July, actually a decision that wasn't welcomed by the Labour Party, and it was the right call.
Throughout when we came out of lockdown.
Yeah, Freedom Day.
Yes. I mean, I supported that, and I supported...
But I mean, the leadership didn't.
Yeah. I think the Labour Party started off this epidemic and got it right. It was a crisis, no party politics. Since then, I think that my party's decision to be more cautious and careful than the government has been over-cautious and political. And the government has taken decisions at different times based on opinion polls, not really the evidence that it was at times. I mean, you can look at a trivial example, not trivial if you fancied a drink, but closing pubs at 10 o'clock in the evening. There was not a jot of evidence that that made any difference. To much more significant cases about regularly testing children in schools, making them wear masks, closing schools after the first. All of that damaged children, and it wasn't based on any scientific evidence at all.
Well, let's hope we're on the way out. And I see the EU today suggesting as well that they think we should stop testing for travellers, at least for EU travellers at the moment. So it's not just happening here, of course, and I think Denmark has made similar moves. Now, we're going to show you a picture, because this is the other big thing that came up during Prime Minister's question time of the party, the Christmas Zoom party that took place inside Number 10. Now, we've known about this event before. What we've not, I think, seen before is kind of the Prime Minister there, who may well have just walked into the room. We don't know. I think someone was trying to suggest that earlier. There's clearly a bottle of sanitizer, but also a bottle of Prosecco with a man sat there with some tinsel around his neck. This is, of course, in December 2020, when the government were telling people not to have Christmas parties. Neil, what do you think when you see that picture?
I'm incredibly disappointed and upset. Yet again, I have to say that categorically I will not defend the indefensible. People up and down the land were quite rightly obeying the public health rules in good faith, and sometimes in personally very tragic situations where they weren't able to see people in hospital. The concept that the people at the heart of government making the rules were then potentially breaking the rules is completely abhorrent. So I will not defend that. What I'm really, really sad about is that unfortunately the democratic process, democracy, is completely paralysed at the moment because this keeps coming up. There'll be drip, 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 more and more upsetting images like this. We need to get closure on this. We need to get all the evidence out in the open, make the judgment, make the evidence-based call, and then move on. But I'm very clear that if rules have been broken, and indeed if the law has been broken, it doesn't matter how senior you are, then there have to be serious consequences.
What about you, Graham, when you see that picture?
I suppose the big surprise about the picture is it was Prosecco and not champagne with the Prime Minister. But I agree with Neil. This is an embarrassment not just to the Conservative Party, which I don't care about, but to the whole country, to have a Prime Minister who doesn't follow his own rules. I'm not that keen on the inquiries. We know what went on. We know there were lots of parties.
We always have due process in this country.
We don't have... Actually, that's just simply wrong about the COVID regulation. Police officers, if they saw you breaking the rules, could give you a summary notice and a fine. There was no due process. There's no due process.
What I'm trying to demonstrate is I don't know the full story of what happened inside Downing Street, and I report on this every day. I don't think anyone in the country does. And so isn't the Prime Minister entitled to at least have those investigations carried out?
There is no question that the Prime Minister has been breaking his own rules. I don't think anybody in the whole...
he denies it.
He's apologised in a form for it. The normal way of dealing with this is to have a vote in the House of Commons. Then Neil, who's been very fair in what he said, can vote for a motion of no confidence or not vote for a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister, and we can get on. If the Conservatives want to keep a Prime Minister in there who nobody in this country, or virtually nobody in this country, believes what he's saying. If they want to do that, let them vote for it in the Commons. Not waste ridiculous... Young men are being stabbed all over London, and we've got police officers who were present when these parties went on, investigating what they saw at the time. It's an absurdity.
Well, I mean, I don't think they were present at the parties, but of course they do man the gate of Downing Street.
They knew that there were cases full of wine going in. They were stood on the gate.
The police aren't here to defend themselves about what they knew and they didn't know. No. They're carrying out an investigation. Let's see how
It's a waste of money.
Neil, I think the problem for the Prime Minister is that, lots of people, there are people who are going to dispute this, of course. They say, well, it's not a party to me, or it's not a party I would want to go to. But there are a lot of people who would look at that picture and say, frankly, it does look like a work party, doesn't it? And the Prime Minister repeatedly has said that he was unaware of parties, he didn't know they were happening. In fact, at one stage he said he was outraged by the thought they were happening when Allegra Stratton resigned. How does that key with... clearly the Prime Minister in a room where, frankly, to a lot of people, it looks like he was at a party?
I agree. It doesn't look positive at all. But we've got to let due process happen. I mean, I was very frustrated that the Sue Gray report, when it was published, was very, very limited. And I think the author of the report, Sue Gray, was very, very frustrated as well. But it was quite damning nonetheless in the limited amount of things that she could say, that there were errors in leadership and judgment, and that some of the behaviour was very difficult to justify. What I really, really want is for the Sue Gray findings to come out in full quickly, the Metropolitan Police investigation to be done quickly, thoroughly, but get it all out in the open quickly so that then we can see all the evidence and make the judgments from there.
It sounds to me and I don't want to go down a hypothetical route, but it sounds to me, Neil, essentially, if it turns out, I mean, it's looking pretty difficult that it's not going to clear out. If it turns out there were parties in Downing Street and the Prime Minister knew about them, that would be cause for you to say he needs to go.
I just reiterate what I said. If the rules have been broken and indeed the law has been broken, it doesn't matter how senior you are, there have to be serious consequences. But let's look at the evidence and then the judgment can come forward. But then we need to get closure and move forward from there.
OK, and it's just because we're running out of time, let's move on to cost of living, because we want to talk about that. The Labour Party, Graham, talking about a windfall tax, talking about getting rid of VAT. But in the end, kind of where and Keir Starmer today was having to go at Rishi Sunak, wasn't he, about this attempt, and quite a significant attempt to try and mitigate people's rising fuel costs. In the end, though, this is not something that's not unique to Britain. We know that there is rising inflation and a cost of living crisis and rising energy bills in most of the Western world, it should be said. I mean, how much blame can you lay here at the government's door?
I think we've got our energy policy upside down. The basis of any energy policy should be security of supply. We've decided not to exploit our own resources with gas under our feet and oil and gas in the North Sea. We would have security of supply. We've got rid of our reserves of gas absurdly. Then the next issue is the price of that gas and the energy supplies. And we can argue whether it's 25% or 10% on domestic bills. We have increased the price of fuel to ordinary people. So basically, I think we need to re-examine our energy policy, exploit our own resources so we've got security, which we haven't got at the moment. And then if we use our own resources and stop charging people extra for not having gas and electricity, going to renewables, until renewables can actually compete and are cheaper than gas and oil, then I think that would help. In the short term, we certainly should get rid of VAT. We've got that power now, we've left the EU. That would help people immediately. And I think we should take a good long look at the taxation of these big multinational oil companies. Some years they make losses, some years they make profit. We have to take a long look at their particular position, and I think we then will probably end up saying that they should be taxed more.
Neil, a windfall tax and companies making billions and billions of pounds of profit, VAT cut, being quite sensible in many ways.
I think certainly moving forward, we've got hard-working families right up and down the country who are really, really suffering now, and it's only going to get worse. And they've got the national insurance rise coming. I actually voted against that. Although I firmly believe we've got to pay for the health and social care, I think we need to have an informed debate how best to do that. I don't think the national insurance rise was the way to do it. That was a manifesto promise, and I voted against that because I firmly believe if you make a promise, you should stick to it. But equally so, I think the government has made positive steps in terms of trying to mitigate some of the energy prices coming forward. I think we need to go further, and I think we need to get people around the table, the energy companies, government, and see what we can do to mitigate against this cost of living crisis that really is coming into sharp relief with the energy prices coming forward. We've got to work together because this is going to be a tough few weeks and months for people moving forward.
Just very, very briefly on that, because I from conversations I had, know that in private there's a lot of Conservative backbenchers who share your view on this national insurance rise. I mean, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak seem that they're not going to move on that. How disappointing is it? Do you think there's a possibility they will still move on it?
I don't think they will. I mean, I made my point on this when I voted against it a few months ago. I don't think it was the right thing to do to break a manifesto promise moving forward on that. But equally so, I would like Labour, the Conservatives to get together. We promised in our manifesto with health and social care that we would try and achieve a cross-party consensus. These are long-term decisions, and work out a positive way forward where we can fund this. And I think that's the way forward.
OK. Neil Hudson and Graham Stringer, thank you very much indeed for joining us here in the studio, talking about Prime Minister's Question Time. Thank you, gentlemen, indeed. OK, you're watching GB News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be talking about Brexit, but also about Poland, Russia and Ukraine, a big geopolitical issue. What is going to potentially happen with Poland? Talks of maybe upwards of 1 million refugees fleeing into that country. We know that Liz Truss and the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace are due to travel to Moscow in the coming days. What are the very latest on that? And a hell of a lot more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you the briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. 27 minutes past 3 o'clock. We're on TV, online, and on your DAB digital radio. Don't forget to get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GB News, and we'll get to some of them. I'm sure you've got some a little later on in the programme. But first, let's talk about Brexit, because UK trade with the EU has been knocked by Brexit, with businesses facing higher costs, more paperwork, and border delays. That's all according to a cross-party Public Affairs Accounts Committee in Parliament. The committee suggests in a new report that the only detectable impact of Brexit so far has been to increase the burdens on businesses, with small businesses being hit the hardest. Well, let's speak to our North West of England reporter, Bradley Harris. He is at Design Element Flowers, who rely heavily on imported goods, and joins us now. Bradley, take it away.
Yeah, that's right, Darren. It's important to be here at Design Element Flowers because this is a business, as you say, that certainly relies on trade outside of the UK and relies on trade from the EU. Every flower in this shop is not from the UK. It's from beyond that, around the world. This bouquet of flowers comes from all over the world. So I want to chat to Neil Whitaker, who is one of the owners here at Design Element Flowers. Good to have you on GB News with us.
Thank you.
I want to talk to you about this because there is an impact that Brexit is having, according to this report, on paperwork, increased costs, delays at the border. Is that having a knock-on effect now with you at the shop?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's having a real big impact because, one, we're having to give another 48-hour lead because we could order at midnight and have them the next day, but we have to put a 48-hour lead in now because of paperwork if it goes wrong at the border. Also, the biggest thing is now with COVID, the growers are closing down a lot of their greenhouses, so only growing a limited amount of stock. So I put my order in for roses for Valentine's and then being told I might not have 200 or 300 of them because of the demand of everybody else. So they're sort of splitting them around the florists around the world, so everybody's still getting some in.
And talking of Valentine's Day, we've got some roses in front of us. One of the reasons why you import from the EU is because, of course, plants are looking very well at the minute, aren't they?
Yeah, well, this particular one is Ecuadorian. So this is an Ecuadorian rose called Explorer. It's one of the best roses. It opens like a cabbage. It really opens large, and it's a good long laster. And anybody who's buying a rose will always fall in love with it. We have customers come back year in, year out. But there are different varieties. So you have got your smaller variety like your Freedom. And then when you see that 100 bunch in the supermarket, it's generally this particular rose, the little sweetheart rose that they use. So you can see the different gradients of roses from best to the smallest.
And now, talk to me about cost, because of course, to get a rose like this comes at a cost. Are you seeing those costs increase because of what's happening over at the border with those checks, things taking longer to come in? Are you noticing an increase?
This particular rose, we're having to charge £1 more than we would have done this time last year. And obviously the year before, it would have been even cheaper. So we've actually had about a 40%, 45% increase since COVID. And it's constantly stayed at that level. It's not dropped. Right. So it's getting harder and harder on every flower.
And, of course, with demand on Monday, a big day for the flower trade. Have you invested a lot in roses for Monday, and at what cost?
Yeah, we've still bought in 1,000 roses.
And they are coming in?
And they are coming in. I've got half of them that I've just started, because obviously we give them a 48-hour hydration, and then we use special foods to make them come to fruition for the customer, so they'll last longer. And we just have to hope that all these guys that are on the last minute, really, they need to get on the phone now to the florist to make sure they get the roses, because we are all limited on what stock we have this year.
Well, Darren, there you go. Look, I've got to be quick if I want to get my roses for Valentine's Day.
Indeed, only a couple of more days left. Bradley, thank you very much indeed. Bradley Harris there joining us. And we're going to get the other side to the coin. There's always two sides to a story, aren't we? We're speaking to the Conservative MP, John Penrose, in just a couple of minutes about some of the opportunities that the UK needs to take from Brexit and what it can do in the future. That and much more in the next 30 minutes between now and 4. But first, let's cross over to Rosie again for the very latest news.
Good afternoon, it's 3:32. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, the legal requirement to self-isolate after testing positive with coronavirus could be scrapped by the end of this month in England. The Prime Minister says he plans to end all of the last domestic COVID restrictions a month earlier than previously announced. Boris Johnson told MPs he'll present the government's Living with COVID plan after the half-term recess. A picture showing Boris Johnson alongside 3 staff members at a virtual Christmas event in December 2020 has just been published by the Daily Mirror. Now, at the time, coronavirus restrictions banned indoor social mixing between households. The Metropolitan Police are currently not investigating that specific event, having reviewed evidence from the Sue Gray inquiry. The UK national terrorism threat level has been reduced from severe to substantial. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says that means an attack is likely rather than highly likely. The Health Secretary Sajid Javid has accepted the apology of the Junior Health Minister Gillian Keegan after she admitted continuing an in-person meeting despite knowing she had coronavirus. Well, posting on Twitter, Ms Keegan said she was listening to three fathers who'd lost their daughters to suicide when she found out her positive result. She says she stayed for a short period with their consent but realises it was an error of judgment. Virginia Giuffre will be interviewed under oath by the Duke of York's lawyers in April as part of her civil claim against him. Ms Giuffre is suing Prince Andrew for damages in the US, claiming she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein to have sex with the royal when she was 17. Prince Andrew denies all allegations. He'll also give evidence under oath in a deposition on the 10th of March in London. Now, the cats belonging to the West Ham footballer Kurt Zuma are now in the care of the RSPCA. Zuma apologised yesterday after a video surfaced online of him kicking and slapping a cat, which the charity is investigating. West Ham player, he's been fined 2 weeks' wages, reported to be around £250,000, which will be donated to animal welfare charities. You're up to date now here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. In a moment, we'll be back to the briefing with Darren.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing on this Wednesday afternoon. It is 23 minutes to 4 o'clock. Well, earlier today, the Prime Minister signalled that the UK is likely to drop the requirement to self-isolate with COVID a month earlier than expected. Those domestic restrictions could be lifted as early as the 24th of February rather than late March. And this would effectively bring an end to COVID restrictions, which, of course, have been in place for almost 2 years. Well, our next guest believes that we can utilise the new powers from Brexit to recover more quickly from the pandemic. It is the Conservative MP, John Penrose, and he joins us now. John, very good afternoon to you. In what way do you reckon we could utilise, in many ways, these kind of Brexit freedoms to ensure that we grow quickly after the pandemic?
Well, I guess the point is that no matter how your viewers voted in the referendum, whether they were in favour of Brexit or against it, now we're out to try and grab the opportunities. And there are some opportunities, particularly around just getting rid of some of the EU-based red tape, trying to be a bit more nimble, trying to be a bit more fast-moving. And that's not just fast-moving in government, that means setting up our economy so that companies have less red tape and they can get on with creating wealth and grabbing the opportunities around the rest of the world much, much faster and much, much more effectively. but it won't just happen automatically. So the crucial thing is, and now you just said, we're starting at last to get out of some of these Brexit, some of these COVID restrictions. It's now up to us to try and grab those opportunities and make sure that we aren't just assuming they're going to happen naturally. We actually have to change some laws. We have to change the way we do things in order to make sure that these Brexit benefits get delivered.
But it's interesting, isn't it, that, constantly we were told for years and years and years about kind of Brussels red tape and how it's stifling business, and yet since we've left, things have got worse. They've actually increased costs and paperwork and border delays, according to the Public Accounts Committee today.
So that's my worry. So the thing which really worries me actually was last week there was a government paper which had just been published called "The Benefits of Brexit" paper, and in it talked about how to get rid of red tape. There's a whole section on it, and it said that they're getting rid of a process which basically requires any minister who wants to introduce a new law to get rid of some old ones first. And that's a really good way of getting rid of red tape. It means that anybody who wants to do something new has to get rid of some of the old stuff before they can even begin. And that sort of creates an incentive. It stops them doing anything. You can't just carry on adding more. You've got to get rid of some before you can add more. Really sensible piece of basic housekeeping, if you like. And yet this paper published last week said they're not even going to try doing that. And the difficulty is, if you don't do things like that, then actually you don't turn the supertanker around. You don't change the habits which have built up over the last 40 years when we were in the EU. And therefore the risk is that in spite of these opportunities, we don't take them. That's the thing which I think perhaps yesterday's reshuffle may allow us to do a bit better. We certainly need to come back to focusing on it much, much more strongly. Because now that we're going to get past the COVID pandemic restrictions, there's no excuse. This is now, if we're getting back to normal, this is job A, this is the main thing, and if we don't do it, we'll have no one to blame but ourselves.
But isn't there a slight contradiction with the government in the sense that they seem to be on one half saying we need to take advantage of Brexit and be more nimble and be maybe more of a competitive economy and strike trade deals, and then on the other side, we're going to have the highest tax kind of intake for 70 years. Bureaucracy seems to be increasing, and the size of the state is getting bigger, which is something, of course, that, many people who wanted to leave the EU didn't like about the European Union. Do you get that contradiction?
Darren, you're preaching to the choir. So, my point is that while everyone understands that all sorts of things had to happen in a heck of a hurry during the pandemic, now that the pandemic is drawing to a close, that excuse doesn't wash anymore, and we've really got to get down to it and start saying the whole point of Brexit was to be able to make these kinds of changes. We may have had an excuse and some very good reasons why it was difficult to do that for the last year and a half, 2 years, or why it's got postponed. But now there is no more excuse. We've got to get on with this. And what worries many of us is that until yesterday's reshuffle, the blob seemed to be winning, that we weren't making enough progress, that we weren't grabbing these opportunities, and that things like this one in, two out approach, where you have to get rid of more before you can add old rules before you can add new ones, weren't being imposed. And if you don't impose them, if you don't get really, really sharp clawed and sharp teethed about it, then the business of Whitehall just carries on adding more rules because that's what Whitehall does.
And just very finally, while we got you, John, just this afternoon, the new Leader of the House of Commons, Mark Spencer, said that people in the real world don't care about the parties in Downing Street. He says they're focused on other things like energy bills, the NHS and jobs. I mean, you're a constituency MP. I'm sure you talk to your constituents quite a lot. Is that your sense as well, that people are kind of fed up with this or not interested in it, don't care about it, essentially, as Mark Spencer put it?
I wouldn't put it quite as strongly as Mark did, although I think he's got a point. People do want the government to get on with the rest of life. There's a huge amount to do. We've just been talking about grabbing any opportunities that may come our way after Brexit. That won't happen unless we aren't distracted and we pay attention to it. So he's right to say that people want to make sure that we're getting through NHS treatment backlogs and that we're dealing with all sorts of other challenges too. I don't think, though, that it's quite true to say that nobody cares about it. I think that there's still the Sue Gray report, when it's finally fully published, hanging over. And I think that the police investigation is still hanging over. So that still matters. And we can't just pretend that it's not there. But he's absolutely right to say that that shouldn't be an excuse for us to ignore the rest of life. And I think everybody who I do wants us to carry on with trying to do the right things in all those other areas in the meantime.
OK, and just finally, John, on the wider issue, I kind of alluded to it earlier, didn't I, about the size of the government and taxation. I've spoken to a lot of your colleagues in the last couple of weeks. Publicly or privately, a lot of them do want to see this national insurance increase ditched. Is that your view, that, you know, this is not the right time to be putting up taxes when we see this cost of living crisis?
I've got to say I'm torn, and I think many Conservative voters are torn too, because the Conservative Party, nobody likes paying more tax, nobody likes raising taxes, but equally the Conservative Party is the party of sound money. We aren't the people who run up the nation's credit card and borrow on the never for incurring debts which our children and our grandchildren have got to repay. And equally, there's a huge, great big backlog. We can all think of members of our family or our friends who are waiting for NHS treatment, which in the normal course of events would have happened but hasn't been able to, and they've got knee replacements that need doing, or cataract operations, or all these other things that are urgently required, and which again, now we're getting back to normal, have to happen. So I think most people are kind of feeling like, well, rather not pay any more tax, thanks very much, but I kind of understand why it's necessary, even though I don't like it. And as I said, the Conservative Party is the party of sound money as well. So I think we're torn at the moment. And I think that as soon as we can get back to having dealt with the finances and got them on an even keel, as soon as we can get back to what I would count as the Conservative Party's core mission, which is to get everything working as efficiently as it can so that we can hand money back to taxpayers, the better, even though in the short term it may be a painful necessity.
OK, John, appreciate your thoughts this afternoon. That's John Penrose there, the MP for Western-super-Mare, joining us from Parliament. Thank you, John, for joining us here on GB News. Lots of you getting in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or indeed you can tweet us. Paul says that the problem needs to be fixed at source. This is around energy. We should be refining and mining our own natural gas and oil to increase supply and energy independence, which will underpin the entire economy and also ensure greater national security. Max is typical of your Labour guests. You have on chanting the Labour mantra. It's not enough, along with the other ones saying we could do it better. As per normal, no feasible, workable alternative. Looking to the Labour Party's magic money tree again. And Russell says that BP say without these obscene, unexpected increase in profits, there would be no investment in new technology and other forms of energy production. Why should consumers who cannot afford energy rises today pay for BP investment? Always get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll get to some more of those before the end of the programme. But first, it's been another busy week in politics. It's only a Wednesday. The Prime Minister, of course, has changed lots of his staff. At number 10, we've had a mini ministerial reshuffle, and today he hosted PMQs with Partygate, the cost of living crisis, and tax rises all on the agenda. Just another week in the life of politics, British politics at the moment. Joining me to discuss all of this is the Labour commentator, political commentator, and Labour councillor, Brendan Chilton. Brendan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. First of all, just speaking to John Penrose there, really interesting, isn't it, that there is this mood within the Conservative Party at the moment about what precisely to do about this national insurance rise. Many publicly saying it still needs to go ahead, but privately, real concern that this is the wrong tax at the wrong time.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, at the moment, you've got a situation where people are seeing a real squeeze on their incomes. We're going to have increasing inflation. I reckon it's going to hit about 7 or 8% when the next figures come out. So at the same time as people are seeing their money spread more thinly, the government are set to take more money off them. Now, if you want to stimulate growth in the economy, reducing people's spending capacity by raising this tax doesn't seem to me to be very sensible. I know a lot of Conservatives privately are very angry about this tax. I think where the government have set themselves so firmly in favour of doing this, it's going to be almost impossible to change their position on this. But I don't think it's sensible for the economy at this moment in time.
What do we think about this latest image? You know, a lot of our viewers emailing in saying, you know, frankly, this is not new. It's only a bottle of Prosecco. It was all at work. Frankly, we don't really care about this. We need to move on. there is an element where I think people have set their views on all of this, and at the moment it seems like there's a kind of media witch hunt out to get the Prime Minister. Is that something you would agree with?
I think to an extent I would agree with that. I certainly think the public are now starting to get bored of the whole Partygate and everyone's standing up saying, oh, did this party happen? Did that party happen? We've had the sort of interim report from Sue Gray. We're awaiting the police investigation. And then today the Prime Minister announced in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's Questions that he would release in full the final version of the Sue Gray report. This image, as I understand it, is one from a party that's already being investigated. Unfortunately, there are probably going to be, for the Prime Minister, more and more photos of these parties coming out. I think Dominic Cummings has tweeted this afternoon, oh, this is very much a mild photo. There are far better ones yet to come out. And so, this is going to carry on and carry on. I think the sooner this is sewn up and dealt with one way or the other, the better, because frankly, it is a huge distraction from the big issues facing the country at the moment, the cost of living crisis, the increase in taxation, possible conflict in the Ukraine. We don't need a political class distracted by, frankly, as far as I could tell, it's an awful cheap bottle of bubbly and not really getting on with the issues of government.
Well, speak for yourself. I think some of us still quite enjoy a bottle of Prosecco, Brendan. Just in the end, just on Keir Starmer himself. Clearly Labour are doing pretty well in the polls. Keir Starmer, I think, even for his critics, has become a more consummate kind of performer of Prime Minister's question time. But there doesn't feel like, and you're a councillor, you talk to lots of constituents and people, there doesn't feel like there's this mad rush from the government to the Labour Party because of a love of Labour policies or their leader. Is that fair, or am I being unfair on the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition?
I certainly think Sir Keir Starmer has grown in stature as Leader of the Opposition. The first year or so was extremely difficult because it wasn't politics as usual. Everything was the pandemic. Now we're returning or moving towards returning to politics as normal, and we're getting onto those big domestic issues, the cost of living, the NHS, crime also featured today. I think Sir Keir Starmer is really growing. And I also think the way he's challenging the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's Questions is extremely analytical, extremely detailed. And while the Prime Minister is very good at the bluster and the jokes, I don't think that's going to carry him at the next election. And at the moment, I wouldn't like to put money either way on what's going to happen, because I think out there in the country, this cost of living issue is really starting to bite. And while the government are making some gestures to try and help people, I don't think they're going to produce anywhere near enough to help people through this crisis, and Labour could capitalise on that.
OK, well, as you say, let's not make any bets, but we'll wait and see. Brendan, as always, appreciate your time and your analysis. Brendan Chilton.
Pleasure.
Labour councillor and political commentator joining us down the line from Kent. Now, we've been talking, of course, about the cost of living crisis, the impact it's having on lots of people, not least of all the big increase in energy bills that we're expecting in the months to come. Well, the industry regulator Ofgem, they were quizzed in front of MPs a little bit earlier, and our reporter Paul Hawkins has been looking at what they had to say.
Oh, Bulb is the fastest growing energy company.
Oh, I heard that too. This was one of 29 failed energy suppliers over the past year. The victims of sky-high wholesale gas prices, which they couldn't pass on because of the price cap.
People's Energy believes in affordable energy for all.
Some, however, were not financially strong enough to deal with market forces. Yesterday, the boss of the energy regulator said they should have checked that.
Financial regulation needs to be tougher. We need a retail sector that's more resilient and more able to deal with the kind of shock that we've seen. And to be clear, Chair, we accept that had we done that earlier, this would have been better for customers.
4 million customers were left without a supplier, and now we're picking up the cost of protecting them through our energy bills.
You're thinking it might be 200 million?
Something like that. Now, those figures aren't figures that we finished with. We're still going through those, but roughly of that order of magnitude. But the vast majority of the cost has been down to re-hedging people when they move from a failed supplier to another supplier. And that's about 85% of the cost that we're seeing.
The average household will have to pay almost £700 a year extra on their energy bills after Ofgem raised the price cap last week. And there could be more pain to come.
The market really is looking at some factors which are fairly binary. And your member has already mentioned the Russia-Ukraine situation. That will clearly have an impact on on supply, and that will clearly have an impact on price. So I'd caution against any projections, but if we just look at the forward market, so what the traders think right now, then it does look like there's upward pressure on prices.
Meanwhile, more and more of us, many working full-time, are having to make difficult choices. 1 million adults across the UK went an entire day without eating over the past month because they were unable to put food on the table, according to the Food Foundation. The charity says it's due to rising energy bills and food prices, plus the loss of the £20 universal credit uplift. The government announced last week a loan of £200 from October via energy companies, plus a council tax rebate in England equating to £150 per household. But critics say it's nowhere near enough. Mortgage costs are also rising, and still to come is the national insurance rise in April, plus the freeze in income tax brackets, meaning millions more will start paying tax or pay the higher rate. Political choices, which the government is sticking to. For now, Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Lots of you have been getting in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Sue says if the government cut fraud relating to benefits and council houses by half, it would save 20 billion. We would need a national insurance hike. There's already enough money if it wasn't wasted. May says when Starmer became leader of the opposition, he promised he would help Boris in any way he could to defeat COVID, but from the outset he has criticised everything that has been done to keep us safe, including furlough that helped many. Not entirely sure that's true on furlough, but we will take your point. Ian says, for goodness sake, will you lot give it a rest? Everybody is heartily sick of this subject. I think he's talking about Partygate. It was 2 years ago. What else can you find to bash ministers with? And Terry says that this latest photo shows nothing other than a person with tinsel around his neck and a bottle of champagne on his table with Boris. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Well, that is it from me for today. I'll be back, of course, at midday covering Gloria tomorrow and at 3. Up next, though, it is Colin Brazier and Brazier after we bring you the weather from the Met Office. See you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin. Some wintry weather on the way across the northern half of the UK. Certainly tonight, some snow and strong winds across Scotland. It could turn icy across Northern Ireland. Things remaining fairly mild and damp across southern England thanks to this weather front. But further north, we've got the colder air, and particularly as this low pressure system arrives, the winds will be picking up and we're going to see lots of snow showers packing into western Scotland. We do have Met Office yellow warnings in place. The snow across Scotland, the ice potential for Northern Ireland as the showers come in here as well. And then the winds really pick up later in the night across western Scotland. So the combination of strong winds, snow showers means blizzard. So yes, there could be some disruption here. Further south, well, things relatively calm, bit damp and drizzly on the south coast. Still quite mild here, although colder than recent nights. But a very cold start for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Still some wintry showers here. Plenty of snow showers across Scotland. Those winds really picking up through the central belt during Thursday morning. The winds themselves could cause some damage and some disruption, combined with those snow flurries coming in. So some pretty grim conditions on the roads. We'll see a few showers getting into parts of northern England, but further south, much of England and Wales, dry and bright on Thursday. Colder, and temperatures still close to average 6 to 9 Celsius, feeling a lot colder with those blustery conditions across the north. And getting very windy on some of these North Sea coasts during Thursday evening, with a few showers likely to continue into the night before that system clears away. And then the winds ease and clear skies means it's going to be frosty for most of us as we head into Friday. A cold start then, but generally a cracking day, certainly across the Midlands, eastern England. Plenty of sunshine on Friday. Further west, the sunshine may turn rather hazy, but apart from a few showers, most places dry, and the winds will be a lot lighter on Friday as well. But it will still feel pretty chilly.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that has been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From